You're not even a real veteran. Stop pretending. That was the first thing Karen screeched at me in the middle of an HOA meeting, her voice echoing off the cheap drywall of the clubhouse. The room went dead silent. Every neighbor turned toward me, their eyes wide, waiting to see how I'd react. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. But before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand how we even got here, how one woman's obsession spiraled into chaos. It started with a simple flagpole in my front yard. I'd planted it years ago, sturdy and tall, and every morning I raised the American flag before heading off base. It wasn't for show. It was habit, discipline, respect, something I carried with me long after serving overseas. Then came the first notice, a letter from the HOA claiming my flagpole was unsightly and unauthorized construction, the kind of boilerplate nonsense they slap on anyone they don't like. I brushed it off at first until Karen, our self-appointed HOA enforcer, decided to make it personal. She showed up one evening while I was mowing the lawn. "You know," she said, hands on her hips, "wearing those boots doesn't make you a soldier. My cousin says you're just cosplaying." Cosplaying. That word hit me harder than I'd admit. I'd buried friends overseas, commanded men in firefights, and here she was, reducing it to a Halloween costume. From then on, Karen made it her mission to expose me. She went on our community Facebook page, posting grainy photos of me in uniform with captions like, "Stolen valor? Do your research, folks." Some neighbors ignored her. Others whispered behind my back. I could have ignored it, but Karen wasn't stopping. She started digging through my mail, asking neighbors if I'd ever actually deployed, even demanding to see my military ID. When that didn't work, she pulled her boldest stunt yet, calling for a special HOA meeting to put me on trial in front of everyone. That's where I found myself on that humid Tuesday evening, sitting in a folding chair while Karen stood at the front with a smug grin. She had a binder tucked under her arm like she was presenting evidence in court. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, tapping the microphone, "we cannot allow frauds to exploit our community's respect for the military. Tonight, I will prove that this man," she jabbed her finger at me, "is no real veteran. He is lying to all of you." Murmurs rippled through the room. I sat quietly, hands folded, waiting for her circus to begin. Because what Karen didn't know was simple. Not only was I a veteran, I was still serving, and my current title was one she'd regret ever challenging. And this was only the beginning. Karen strutted up to the podium like she was testifying before Congress. She slapped open her binder, filled with printouts from Google, screenshots of my Facebook page, and blurry photos she'd snapped of me outside my house. "Exhibit A," she said dramatically, holding up a picture of me in uniform. "If you zoom in right here, you'll see this patch doesn't even look real. He bought it off eBay." I didn't move, didn't flinch, just leaned back in my chair watching the show. Neighbors shuffled in their seats, some looking skeptical, others embarrassed for her. "Exhibit B," Karen continued, pulling out another sheet. "I contacted the Department of Veterans Affairs, and guess what? No record of him." A man in the back raised his hand. Karen? The VA isn't where service records are kept. That's the Department of Defense." Her face twitched, but she pressed on. "The point is, he's lying. He's been parading around like some war hero, raising that flag every morning to guilt us into silence. But not anymore. Tonight, we vote to remove his flagpole and fine him for violating HOA rules." A low murmur swept the room. People started whispering to each other, some nodding, others shaking their heads. Finally, I stood. My chair scraped across the floor, echoing louder than her voice had. "Are you done?" I asked calmly. Karen bristled. "You don't get to ask questions. You need to answer for yourself." I walked to the front, meeting her glare with a steady look. "You want proof? Fine, you'll get it." From my pocket, I pulled out my current military ID, sliding it onto the podium beside her binder of nonsense. The seal gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I heard gasps from the crowd, but I wasn't finished. "Karen, you've spent weeks trying to paint me as a fraud, but here's the truth. Not only am I a veteran, I'm still serving. And right now, I'm the commanding officer of the base 20 miles from here." The room went dead silent. Karen blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe, because the story is only going to get better. I let the line sink in, then leaned closer to her. "So here's the real issue. You didn't just slander a neighbor. You slandered an active duty commander in front of witnesses. And that's defamation." A man near the front whispered, "Holy hell!" Another muttered, "She's finished." Karen tried to recover, jabbing her finger at me. This is intimidation. He's lying. He forged that ID." I raised an eyebrow. "Careful. That's another false accusation in front of your own HOA board. You keep stacking those up, you'll be explaining yourself to a judge soon." Her binder slipped from her hand, papers spilling across the floor. But she didn't bend to pick them up. She was too busy staring at me, realizing the trap she'd just walked into. And the night was only getting started. The HOA boardroom was buzzing like a kick beehive. Karen's binder lay scattered across the floor, her so-called evidence looking like the pile of garbage it was. I could have left it at that. Embarrassing her in front of the neighbors would have been satisfying enough. But Karen crossed a line when she accused me of stolen valor. And in the military, when someone crosses a line, you finish it. One of the HOA members cleared his throat nervously. Major, do you want to submit a formal complaint? I nodded. Yes, and not just with this board. I'll be filing a report with the sheriff's office for defamation, harassment, and malicious conduct. Karen has publicly accused me of crimes I did not commit. She also sought to strip me of my lawful rights under the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005, Public Law 109-243. That's a federal violation. The room broke out in murmurs again. One older neighbor leaned toward another and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's cooked." Karen's face turned blotchy red. "You can't sue me. I was protecting this neighborhood." I held her gaze, calm and steady. "No, you were feeding your ego, and tonight, that ends." The sheriff's deputies arrived not long after. Turns out, a few other neighbors had already called them, tired of Karen's antics spiraling out of control. The deputies didn't need much convincing. They listened to her rants, saw my ID, and collected statements from the HOA board. One of them even picked up her binder, flipping through the shaky evidence with a raised eyebrow. "She really tried to claim you weren't in the military?" the deputy asked. "She did it here, in front of everyone," I replied. "That's slander. I'll be pressing charges." Karen's confidence collapsed. She started sputtering excuses, blaming her sources, claiming she was misled. But the deputies weren't buying it. She was cited for defamation, harassment, and HOA misconduct, and told to appear in court. By the next HOA meeting, the board had voted her out as president. Not suspended, not warned. Completely removed. She also got slapped with fines for abuse of power and a no-contact order requiring her to stay away from me and my property. I raised my flag the next morning with a steadier hand than I'd had in months. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of peace. Karen's reign was over, and the neighborhood could finally breathe. As for her, she spent the next few weeks hiding behind drawn curtains while her once loyal supporters gave her the cold shoulder. Reputation? Gone. Power? Gone. The HOA? Better off without her. And me, I didn't need to brag about who I was. The truth had spoken for itself. Everything ended that night when Karen tried to brand me a fake. But she forgot one thing. Real service doesn't need approval. It leaves a record, it leaves a legacy, and it leaves people like her in the dust. What do you think, folks? Do you think Karen finally got what she deserved, or did she get off too easy? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I read every single one, and if you've got your own crazy HOA story, share it too. You never know, it might end up in the next video. The end.